All right, everyone. The European Union, like the heads at Brussels and some of the politicians nationally, like Angela Merkel, definitely, some of the British leadership. I know that the UK is leaving the EU, supposedly, fraught with difficulties. My expectation is that they do have a full Brexit. What the terms of their severance from it will be, who knows and who cares. Certainly the government of Sweden, certainly the French government, they're enemies of free speech. They do not believe in freedom whatsoever. Their people are subjects. Now, I feel sorry for people who are actually in these countries. Like, sometimes when I criticize a country, I think people get the wrong idea and they think that I'm criticizing the people of the country itself. It's like Russia. I'm a critic of Putin. I'm not a fan of Putin's. That doesn't mean I have a stick up my ass about any randomly chosen Russian individual. I don't like Macron. But that doesn't mean I dislike French culture or French people. I dislike the German government. Merkel is one of the worst around the entire world. Kim Jong-un would be another example. But that doesn't mean I dislike Germans. It doesn't mean I dislike North Koreans. The same is true anywhere in the world. Maduro is totally inept, has no idea what he's doing, and is starving his own people. That doesn't mean I hate the Venezuelans. So I feel sorry for people when they're under a government that has no real constraints on its ability to make people miserable. Like, my YouTube channel is blocked. The channel itself, not all the videos, is blocked in Germany. Now, it's not blocked in Saudi Arabia. It's not blocked in Iran. I get views there on my channel. It's not blocked in Yemen. It's not blocked in the Sudan. It's not blocked in Venezuela. It's not blocked in Russia. Shall I go on? I've even gotten views from certain, I know that there are certain locations in China where they have outside access beyond their Chinese intranet. I get views there too. I've talked to people who are in mainland China who are still able to access my material at these locations. But people in Germany can't subscribe to my channel without changing their country code. Don't you find this a little bit friggin' odd? That these countries almost always in Western Europe, with the exception of Poland, of course. Poland, I think they must be using a German telecom or something to connect when they're saying, well, I can't actually view your channel. My thought is probably in parts of Poland you can. I think this may also be the case with Italy. I think certain parts of northern Italy, it's blocked, and then in other locations it's not. It's like a patchwork. It's really weird, actually, how within the EU you have these overlapping services that go through one country, are subject to that country's rules. I have a feeling that Germany is responsible for most of these problems because Merkel has difficulties. My channel has been blocked there since at least 2008 or 2009, a long, long time ago. And at the point, I didn't really cover politics. So I don't think it's just the political discourse that Merkel has a problem with. Don't you find that slightly odd? That these countries blocking my content are all part of the so-called free world? I find it a little bit odd. But they're going after things more. That is, they want European legalism to extend to U.S. firms. And our government needs to act on this topic. And the only way that we're going to get the government, by the way, to act, to protect U.S. firms from having to deal with European legalism, like they keep trying to find Twitter and Google and Facebook. They're like, oh, there were hate-filled posts put on here and you need to take them down. How long do you think it will be before we leave the realm of their policing users within their own territory to their trying to police other content that their users may end up interacting with because of workarounds on these sites? How long do you think it will be before they're no longer trying to simply fine these companies, they're simply trying to subjugate them entirely to their own legal processes? Because they're already threatening to fine and sue these. Personally, if I were running Google, or if I were running Twitter or Facebook, one of these gargantuan companies, I would tell them to screw themselves. And I'd say, well, if you think you can do better, you can do without our service. What do you think would happen in your countries if suddenly people were no longer able to access in any way, shape, or form our services? You couldn't use Google as a search engine. You wouldn't be able to use YouTube. You wouldn't be able to use Blogspot. Screw your AdWords or what. You can't use them anymore. Sorry. And I would take the message directly to the people of the countries that were involved. I'd say, no, I'm sorry. We're a U.S. firm. We're constrained by the U.S. Constitution, and we're not dealing with it anymore. You can have your own style. You can have your own Euro search or whatever it's going to be. Use something, maybe the Russians, use Yandex to search for things. You can use Youku, the Chinese YouTube, or some other site, because we're not willing to deal with the crap anymore. We're going to withdraw entirely from your countries. You find a workaround to connect, that's just fine. You can use it at your leisure, but you're breaking probably the EU's laws. It's about time we stand up against this, especially here in the United States. Creators based in the US should not have to deal with European legalism. We shouldn't. We shouldn't have to deal with it. These are US firms. So we need to start speaking out against it. We need to lean on and pressure the government to do one of a few very simple things. The first possibility is nothing more than a simple bill reaffirming that the internet is explicitly covered under the First and Fourth Amendments, that users within this country have a right to interact with whatever content they want, that their content should be shielded completely from repercussions based on the legalism of foreign states. Look, nobody's suggesting, I haven't heard anybody seriously suggest that the nation of Saudi Arabia should be able to take down anti-Islamic content on YouTube or on Facebook or Twitter. Like, it might get targeted anyway by people here. But I haven't heard anybody suggest seriously that users based outside of a country should be subject to their form of what they consider right and wrong on that token. Or that some random tribal region should be able to take down material that's critical of some tribal leader. Like, or that Venezuela should be able to say, well, you know, Maduro should be able to say, oh, I don't want to see any Maduro criticism on YouTube. You need to take these videos down. And part of it is economic. Of course, Western Europe is far more keyed into the internet than some of these other zones. What about the Japanese government? The Japanese government has legalism in place to prevent certain types of criticism of their government, which I don't think is a great thing, by the way. The libertarian in me just can't deal with such things. Does that mean that Shinzo Abe should be able to come out and say, well, this video is critical of Japan, this Facebook group is critical of my leadership, you need to take it down? Would anybody seriously suggest that it was a good idea for US firms to begin doing so? I don't think so. Right now, the censorship is largely, not completely, but largely limited to policing the user base within those countries, because Google and Facebook and Twitter are multinational firms. They get a worldwide presence because the internet is worldwide. Basically, you end up with situations where someone's channel is blocked in another country, something like that. The video has been labeled to be inaccessible in another country. Now, there are a million ways to get around this, and I know you can change the country code, you can use some third-party site to get around it, you can use a VPN, whatever. I'm surprised that the German government hasn't banned these things altogether. So I get plenty of views on my videos from Germany, although it's declining over time because they keep earmarking videos as inappropriate, and, stuff like that, which is nonsense. They just don't want their citizens to be able to see the truth. And I'm not surprised, because the European Union is the weakest link of the world right now, which is why they're the ones that are censoring things most heavily. All of this shit we're dealing with is coming from the European Union. It's coming from Brussels. It's coming from a handful of bureaucrats over in Western Europe. It's not coming from the Middle East. I'm still perfectly viewable in most of the Middle East. I feel just fine. Pakistan, yeah, if you're a Pakistani, you can subscribe to my channel. You can look at all my content. You're a Saudi Arabian, yeah, you can still look at my content. You're in Egypt, all these countries that are supposedly so totalitarian, yeah, you can still view this content, even if I'm totally anti-religious. Even if I criticize your government, they haven't blocked me. Germany has. France has. Italy, or at least parts thereof, same with Poland has. The Czech Republic has. That's very, very funny to me. Oh, the free world. No, I think you mean the economically overdeveloped part of the world that likes to lean on other countries' companies to sit in on their own criticism or of freedom, that likes to shelter itself from repercussions because its policies are so piss poor. That's what I think it's all about. You see, there's simply not enough economic and diplomatic clout from a country like maybe Somalia or Sierra Leone to suppress content on a site that's worth more than their whole economy. Not a problem for Germany, not a problem for France or any of their local vassals that use their telecoms, apparently. Therein lies the problem. We need to rise up with one voice online and protect the internet. And this isn't just, well, the US, we need to support the Constitution. Why aren't the Western Europeans speaking out more about this? You realize how much you have to lose, right, if any of these large firms do decide to go rogue and say, okay, the EU's trying to fine us, they're trying to sue us, they're trying to tell us what we can and can't do. Enough is enough. We're US-based firms. The US has a bigger internet audience than any of these EU states do, and some of them don't care anyway. So why should we listen to you? You need us more than we need you anyway. Because who else is going to come along and fill that gap? You think, given a choice between the two following, which do you think that the average EU citizen is going to choose? They can get a VPN or something and continue using established, extremely good US-based services and interact with the larger pool of people around the whole friggin' world, or they can be insular and just be like, have an EU site where you have very, very PC, heavily policed, heavily censored, EU-friendly content. Which do you think the average person's going to use? Yeah, I think that it's going to have an effect. All this censorship and legalism coming from the EU will have the same effect of similar programs under the USSR. What they did was spawn a subculture where people did everything within their power to get around that legalism. Without getting caught, of course. You don't want to get sent off to Merkel's re-education camps that I'm sure that she would love to set up any time now. But the EU authorities are so inept, have no idea what they're doing, and are running all of Europe into the ground. So they don't want criticism, especially from outside of their borders. And at the same time that they would have Russian-style censorship of criticism of government, they then say, oh, you great evil, we must stand for freedom and civilization. Bullcrap. Merkel doesn't stand for civilization. Neither do the Hollands and Macrons, the David Camerons, and all these other fools over there that are leading these countries deep into the pits of despair. They don't know what they're doing. Or rather, some of them do. Some of them are just inept. Others are corrupt. But they're all one or the other. Some of them are probably both. They try to be corrupt, but really they're just dumb or something. That's what's happening. We need to stand up against that. I'm totally against censoring the internet. I think the U.S. government, to protect U.S. users at least, and U.S. firms, needs to either make it clear the first and fourth extend explicitly to the internet. Specifically, U.S. users have the right to be in privacy against any incursions by any foreign states too, not just the U.S. government. There should be a more extended process for data sharing on U.S. users, certainly. And they have the right to say what they want to say. Or you can extend it in the constitutional fashion. Or you can declare these sites public utilities, which puts them squarely and solely under U.S. law and exempts them from that sort of legalism. They would be U.S. government co-opted. Now, I don't support that particular plan. I think having a privatized internet is a good thing largely, but we do need to do more to protect these firms from being bullied around by foreign states. It doesn't help that Obama decided to say, it doesn't need to be U.S.-based anymore. We should do everything within our power to get it back and make sure we should enshrine it in our own laws that it can never be fiddled around with again like Obama did with it. The European government should have zero say over what any U.S. firm does on the internet. It's not your internet. They're not servers in your country. They're over here. These firms are based in the U.S. We're not telling your firms what they can and cannot do with regards to their online content. We're not telling you have to live by the First Amendment too on your own sites that are homegrown. No, we're saying that sites here need to obey that. They don't need to obey your laws, Merkel's legalism. It's just, it's dumb. Having a patchwork internet where all these countries can fiddle around with one another's firms would lead to a situation where the internet looks like the UN. It would be bureaucratically strangulated, extremely expensive, highly PC. The truth would never be told. It wouldn't be fun, and people would have to construct a second totally privatized internet anyway. We would literally have to rebuild all of the internet because the old one, it would completely die off. Then you'd have to have some startup to migrate content from the old internet to the new one in the interim period so that all that stuff's not lost forever. It'd take years and years. That's what we're looking at if we bow before European-style legalism. Well, I'm going to keep saying what I want to say. And it would be very, very funny to be targeted by a foreign government using a site that's controlled within the United States. It would set up a huge legal battle, the likes of which I don't think any of these firms want to get involved in. Why don't these sites call on their user bases for help? Look, YouTube has hundreds of millions of users. So does Facebook. So does Twitter. Why don't you tell your users, hey, the EU keeps trying to sue us. We need your help. We launch a petition. Have people mass email the leaders of the EU states. Get the government involved. Have the US government has the power to help shelter US firms from EU legalism. Why don't you get everyone involved? It would be a grand army against censorship. It would probably work, and the internet would be safe for another generation. And there are plenty of people who really like to be activists online that they'd be perfectly willing to help. And it would unite the far right and the far left. Nobody wants to have to deal with Merkel's idea of what constitutes acceptable speech. If they're in the US anyway. Hell, if they're in half of the rest of the EU states, they don't want to have to bow before that stuff. The Polish, who apparently can't even regularly visit my channel, have been standing against her now for over a year on other tokens. Why don't you stand against her on free speech? Why don't you ensure that people can say what they need to say? Look, you start strangulating speech. What elements do you think eventually gain the command of those programs that allow them to stamp out speech? The most corrupt, the most warmongering, the most central, the most given over to totalitarianism. There's the problem. You limit one thing, you end up limiting more things. The more you limit, the more abusive it gets. Invariably, more abusive people will take advantage of such a thing. We've seen it before. Happened in the USSR, happening in the EU, which is basically USSR 2.0 right now. That's about all. Peace out.